Welcome to Thimbleberry U. I am John Jagay. Amy Wallace from Thimbleberry Financial joins me as always. Hey, Amy.
Hey, Jag. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Amy, even though we've got a not-so-pleasant topic to discuss today. We're talking about being laid off. I know you work with a lot of healthcare tech clients, and this happens a lot in that industry. When I was a radio DJ, I think I was laid off 3 times in my 15-year career, all for budget cuts. Not because I stunk, but just for budget cuts. I want to make sure I put that out there. What made you want to talk about this topic in today's episode?
Yeah, a little while back, we talked about recession and why technically recession shouldn't matter to individuals. But there is fear around recession, and right now, it's, August 30th that we're recording this, and we haven't officially heard we are in a recession, but it seems we're headed there. And so there's fear. With recession usually comes layoffs. It's a common side effect. And so I know this is a topic on people's minds. Mm-hmm. We also have seen some layoffs with certain companies already, especially in the tech space. We just had a large layoff here in the Portland area with a tech company that we've had many clients working at over the years. And so we've been talking with anyone who is affected by that. But also there's been talk of more mergers and acquisitions. And like you said, consolidation and budget cuts, mergers and acquisitions is a great place where this can happen.
Right. I know when it's happened to me and I've been laid off, there's that initial sense of panic that sets in and what do I do? And it's very overwhelming. Okay, what do I do for paperwork? What do I do for this, that, health insurance, finding a new job, paying my bills, all that sort of stuff. Where do you start? You're laid off. What is the first thing you should do?
Yeah, I think, Jag, the easiest way to address this is to break it down into a couple different categories. I think there's probably 3 categories that come to mind. The first being mental health. The second being immediate financial needs, and the third being items to put on the financial to-do list.
Okay. I'm really glad that you're mentioning mental health first. I think it's become a lot less taboo to talk about this in recent times, and especially the stress of a layoff. It's very easy to talk about the money and money in and money out, but in some ways it's a trauma that you're going through to lose your job and go through that. So what is on the mental health piece of this? Let's start there.
Yeah, I think, I'm approaching this from the vantage point of being a friend and a professional and not being a financial professional, I should say, and not being a therapist. So right. Therapists may disagree with me strongly on this. I don't know. First thing I'm going to say is breathe, because breathing always seems to help.
Yeah.
I have a 6-year-old. We practice breathing regularly in our house. Second, I think, is finding the bright side.
Okay. That can seem difficult in that moment.
It can, but usually there's something that you didn't love about a job. I think that's true in almost all jobs. And so there is some bright side, some other path you've wanted to follow, that maybe this is a good opportunity to do it. Maybe you really needed a break for a little bit. There's something that you can look at and grab onto as something positive coming out of anything bad.
Okay.
Third thing I'd say is do the next right thing for you. And what I mean by that, for some people, that might be to grieve.
Yeah.
Right? Because losing a job, that's, like you said, that's a trauma, and grieving comes with trauma. I would say, this is, again, financial professional speaking, give that grief a deadline, because this does have financial ramifications. And this is a financial podcast. And for others, it might be just immediately taking action. I'm one of those people that in many situations, I say, what's next? Let me just go do that, because that's what helps me feel so much better. But not everybody's that way.
That's a really good point. It does depend on your personality. There have been times where I've wanted to grieve losing a job, and there have been times where I'm like, okay, hit the ground running. What do I need to do? And feeling active and taking action and making use of that 8 hours in the day that I wasn't in the office prior to that, whether it's networking, working on my resume, applying to jobs, whatever it is, that gave me a sense of ownership of my day, of I'm not just sitting there resting on my laurels, I'm actually putting effort into finding the next thing. So that is a really important point. And again, depends on the situation.
Absolutely.
The second thing you said, Amy, after mental health is immediate financial needs. And this is really important. I think that goes without saying. But what are the immediate financial needs you need to think about first?
Yeah, I'm going to start with severance agreement because it will help influence the rest of the things on the list.
Yeah.
So if you were laid off, you may have received a severance package, severance agreement. Many people, I think, might just sign those and say, cool, I'm getting money. But read through it. What are the assumptions? Does an attorney need to review it? Depending on the situation, that might be the case. And if so, you're going to want to take steps to get that reviewed and then to sign and return it if it's appropriate. But my point here is really reviewing it, thinking through, does it all make sense? Are there assumptions? We recently saw a severance agreement that looked really straightforward, but when it came down to it, after it had been supplied to employees, there were a whole bunch of points that were really unclear, and the company had to send out an email to everyone impacted clarifying.
Oh, wow.
Because there were questions about how the money broke down. It wasn't the dollar amount stated that you're getting, because that dollar amount also was what they would be paying for your health care for the next little while. So it was the dollar amount that you're getting was what would be taxed, but not actually being received.
That is a really important question, is how long are they going to keep up your healthcare insurance? And then there's the whole mess of COBRA, your own health insurance and all that too. You're giving me a flashback to, I just remember it clear as a bell, it's almost 10 years ago, the second of my 3 radio layoffs. We'd heard there were going to be mass layoffs. The admin came up to my desk and said, hey, can you take a walk over to Nick's office with me? Oh, okay. And then I walk into the office, I see who's sitting around the room, and I see there's a manila envelope on the desk with a sticker that says Jonathan Gay on it. And I'm like, oh, there it is. There it is. I've seen this movie before. So if it's happened to you before, I think sometimes you know what to expect. Another point I want to add here, and I think a lot of our listeners and your clients work in the tech sector, so it's important that they may be aware of this. Not disparaging the company on social media is so important, and that is often part of a severance agreement. I remember seeing that, and especially in radio where we're communicators and we would have followings on our social media pages as DJs, but a lot of those severance agreements said, hey, you are entitled to X weeks of pay, but if you go on Facebook and say, this company, blah, 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 I can't believe they laid me off, they can go take a flying leap. I'm sanitizing that, of course. They can say, all right, fine, we're yanking your severance. We're not paying you. It can be a very, very expensive mistake to vent on social media after you're laid off. I want to make that point because I think it's really important.
Absolutely. And I think that's another great reason why reviewing that severance agreement needs to be the very first thing that happens financially.
Got it. Okay, so what in the immediate aftermath in addition to the severance agreement, Amy?
Yeah. I always start the foundation of a financial plan with cash reserves. So where are your cash reserves at? If you did get a severance, how is that going to help? Cash reserves are there for emergencies and opportunities. And I think a question that comes up is this the right time to actually use them? Yes.
Yeah, you lost your job. That qualifies as an emergency. Yep.
Yes, it qualifies as an emergency. I would say that in a layoff, it's a good idea to be cautious about finding opportunities like a trip to Europe or something like that. I've got the time. This is an opportunity. Should I do it? Might not be the best time to take advantage of expensive opportunities.
Yeah, you may have the time, but you may not have the money. Exactly.
Exactly. Next thing would be to look at both debt and expenses. Are there some items that can be deferred? If you're currently making student loan payments, maybe now is the time to switch those to zero while you can and while, the interest rate's at zero, for example. That's a way that debt could be deferred. Maybe there's some expenses. You are about to enter into a contract for some remodeling. Maybe you want to put that on hold for the time being. So looking at places you can be flexible with that. Another thing about debt that I often hear is, well, my cash reserves is big. This would allow me to pay off my car and then I don't have to worry about that car payment. Should I do that? I also hear this type of question, since we already touched on recession, when recession is coming. Okay. I've got this cash. I should just pay this off just in case I lose my job. So whether or not you've lost your job, cash is king. And if you have an appropriate cash reserve, what's over could be applied towards debt. But you also want to be cautious because you don't know how long you will be unemployed. And so that cash may be valuable. That cash can make your payments for you. So that's the thing to remember. You don't have to pay it off all in one lump sum. The cash can make the payments. And then the cash stretches further.
I like that a lot. Okay.
Jag, you touched on this earlier. Next on the list, how are you covering health insurance? It could be part of your severance agreement, or it might not be. So how are you going to make sure that you are covered? That could be COBRA. It could be getting your own insurance. It could be going on a spouse or partner's insurance, if that's an option. Now, keeping in mind that with new insurance, anything other than COBRA, you're going to end up with a new deductible and a new plan maximum for the year. So that might mean some larger expenses depending on what your health history is like, or, events that could come up. Can't predict when we're going to break a leg, for example.
Right. I will say, as horrible as the timing seemed, when my last radio layoff happened a week after my wedding, I later found out they were going to lay me off before my wedding, but my immediate boss got me a stay of execution because he said, I really don't want to lay this guy off on a Tuesday and go to his wedding that Saturday. That might be a little awkward. You talked about finding silver linings earlier. When I got laid off, I was like, well, I'm married now. Guess I'm going on my wife's insurance, because that was pretty straightforward. So that was, again, silver linings like you talked about earlier. That was mine in that situation.
Absolutely. Sounds like a great boss. And one thing to note is Cobra can often be more expensive than getting your own insurance.
I do remember getting a lot of sticker shock anytime I've looked at Cobra and went, it's going to cost me what? As a single person? Whoa.
Yep. So you want to shop the two, but also consider the time of year that your layoff is happening. If it's happening in November, Cobra for 2 months to start your own insurance in January might make sense, especially if you do have ongoing health issues.
Okay, that makes sense.
That might be less expensive than getting a new deductible and a new plan maximum that you're going to have to pay for 2 months.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. And then another thing, and I think, outside of the severance agreement, these could kind of happen almost in any order, but sign up for unemployment.
Yeah.
Right? Your severance agreement, if you have one, is going to state how long that severance counts as salary, but know when you can sign up and look at that.
That is so important. And again, that is something that I dealt with each of the 3 times I was laid off in radio, was having the unemployment and having it set up so that it would kick in when the severance ran out. And I'll also say, I remember having a friend who was laid off and he said, oh, I don't want to mooch, or whatever word he used. I don't want to take unemployment. And I said, no. Your employer pays into this in the event that you get laid off. Like, this is there for this exact reason. I think sometimes there's a stigma around collecting unemployment, and there really shouldn't be. It is designed for you to be there in the event that you lose your job by definition.
Yes, absolutely, Jag. I'm so glad you said that. It is there for this purpose, and you're leaving money that is yours on the table if you don't apply.
Okay, so Amy, we spent the last few minutes talking about the short-term things that need to be taken care of. What are some of the things you want to look at longer term beyond what we've already discussed?
Yes, I'm going to put insurance on this list. I know it's everybody's favorite topic. Life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care. So I'm not talking about health insurance. We already touched on that one. If you had this through your prior employer, are you able to continue that coverage? And should you? That may require a cost-benefit analysis. Another thing is, if you know you want to continue it, do you actually know how to pay for it? Like, do you know how to contact the company and how to make sure your payments are being made? Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I'd say is, this may not be the right time to consider if you should discontinue individual coverage. What I mean by that, if you have individual coverage, there was a reason you got it. Mm-hmm. You're unemployed. You may be trying to reduce expenses. But for example, with disability insurance, it's there to protect your ability to earn an income. If you're planning to go back to work, you may want that coverage because you may not be able to get it again.
Okay.
And speaking of disability insurance, some policies have a clause that if you're laid off, you may not need to make premiums for a certain period of time. So that is something to look into. The next thing I'd say is what to do with your retirement plan.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not making a recommendation as I talk about this. There's really 3 options ultimately when you are employed. One would be roll it over to your new employer, leave it where it is, or move it to an IRA. I think the best choice short term, and I don't like giving generic advice, but I think the best idea short term when you've just been laid off is to leave it where it is. There's no reason to make a rush decision. You don't know what your option is in terms of what your next plan looks like. And so just sit tight. It's okay to make the decision to be comfortable with where you are and know that you want to have all your options when you do make the decision about what to do with that.
Leaving it where it is keeps your options open. Although I put a caveat on that. Again, personal experience here is a couple times when I've changed jobs and gotten a new job, there was the old 401k sitting in a previous account, and I sat on it forever and ever and ever and ever, and I really should have acted sooner. It was a little bit more complicated the longer I waited to roll it over. So you can keep your options open, but don't wait years and years and years like I did.
Absolutely. Yeah, if it's on the to-do list, I'm meaning for it to be dealt with, checked in on, not sit there for years. And then the last thing that's really coming to mind for me right now is around equity compensation. This is especially because we do work in that tech space so much. And our clients often have, and as our listeners might, incentive stock options or non-qualified stock options or shares of stock that have vested from RSUs, for example. Thing to recognize is that if they had been, they're no longer subject to a trading window. So now they can trade at any point versus maybe just 4 months out of the year. Does that mean that maybe their strategy should change? Also, should the strategy change for what to do because they're no longer working for that company, so their risk profile is no longer the same?
Right, that's something we've talked about before, especially in these tech companies where, all your eggs in one basket because the value of the stock and your salary are coming from the same place. And forgive me for stating the obvious here, but if you are no longer working for that place, that's no longer keeping all your eggs in that same basket. That does change the math.
Absolutely. And just that trading window piece. Oh, I can only sell at these times. Well, no. Oftentimes, while the trading window's open, a stock price might decline because all the employees are selling during that time. So you may have more opportunity to do better with the stock because you can now sell at any time.
That makes a lot of sense. And again, this goes to where you really specialize in tech and healthcare clients at Thimbleberry Financial. Amy, if somebody wants to come talk to you about their financial future, again, especially in the tech and medical sectors, but also in general about their financial future, what are the best ways to find you and your team?
Yes, they can find us online at thimbleberryfinancial.com or give us a call at 503-610-6510.
Important stuff, Amy, and hopefully not relevant to too many of our listeners, but always good to know. Take care. We'll talk again soon.
Sounds great, Jag. Talk to you then.
Registered representative, securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisor representative, Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Thimbleberry Financial are not affiliated.